It's my absolute delight to welcome you to the 9th annual Ready by 21 National Meeting, the annual conference and family reunion of the Forum for Youth Investment. As I attest to our attendees every year, this meeting really is a labor of love for us. It's our biggest opportunity every year to gather with you, our incredible network of partners, clients, funders, and longtime friends. Gathering for our conference virtually is a first for us, but like so many of you, this year has taught us to be flexible, to give ourselves grace as we try new things, but to keep moving forward, to not lose track of what's important. And changing the odds for young people has never felt more important, more needed, and more urgent. After having to make the heartbreaking decision to cancel our conference last year when we were headed to Louisville just weeks before we were on our way, we couldn't fathom skipping another year, not being together for another year, not being inspired and challenged and strengthened by the learning and the energy and the examples you bring and generate every year when we're together. One of my great joys at the conference every year is to get to send some of our incredible staff up on stage so that you can see and meet and appreciate them. While I can't send them up to the main stage in the same way this year, I'm delighted that technology can actually enable more of them to help us get underway today. As I turn to them, let me just say, while there's no pretending that it hasn't been a really difficult year for the world, for the country, for our field, and certainly for us at the Forum too, there are many things that give us hope, many things that give us optimism, and there are things for which we're proud and remind us of the strength and the resilience of our field.
We've been reminded that in disruption, there is great opportunity. We've been inspired by our work with partners to reimagine the learning and development ecosystem. We are looking forward to our work with state and local leaders who are determined to not rebuild things as they were, but to take advantage of the softened walls between school and community partners and build forward together.
We've been so inspired by the innovation and resilience of the network leaders we work with and the frontline staff they support, who found that even in virtual and hybrid programming, they could focus on high quality practices to support young people, even by digging deeper into social emotional learning skills. We've also been trying to reimagine how we can deploy our program quality assessments, our coaching, our professional development trainings in live, virtual, interactive ways to meet the moment, help strengthen adult practice, and prepare the field for the opportunities created by new funding, new awareness, and new partnerships.
We've been moved by young leaders who are standing up, fighting back, and pushing us as a nation and our communities around the country. We're trying to do a small part, recruiting and supporting young people using stories and data and youth-led movements to change policies and public narrative.
And just as the field has been growing, learning, and striving, so have we at the Forum. We've been joined by some talented new dynamos over the last 12 months, many of whom you'll get to meet in the breakout sessions. Montana Kane, Jordan Pineda, Alyssa Lucas, Pushka Yerbanga, Josiah Jones, Shaquana Boykin, and Danielle Varner. And like so many of you, we've tried to respond to the times and live up to the moment.
From the inequities that the pandemic laid bare to the continued rise of racial injustice exemplified by the most recently publicized examples of police brutality against Black people and hate crimes against Asian Americans, the Forum staff continue to be challenged by the ongoing struggle against injustice. As a result, we were stirred to action and committed to becoming a bolder, clearer, tougher anti-racist organization. As you've heard, this commitment is increasingly evident in our external work. But just as importantly, we turned the bolder, clearer, tougher anti-racist lens inward. Last summer, we offered workshops to staff of color on racial healing and to white staff a workshop on anti-racism and allyship. We launched employee-led affinity groups. We moved to a more flexible schedule so staff have the flexibility to celebrate and commemorate holidays that have cultural and religious importance to them. And we increased the diversity of the Forum's board of directors. Despite these great strides and our deep commitment to racial and social equity, we still have much to learn and improve. Therefore, a staff-led group led the search and selected an external partner to take us through the Forum's internal DEI journey. The long-term commitment will help the forum identify and dismantle practices and processes that have contributed to inequities and harm within the organization, and help us embark on a new era of growth, improvement, and transformation grounded in equity and justice.
Like all of you, we've struggled with the pandemic's toll on our minds, bodies, and spirits. Here at the Forum, we've committed to expand the supports for ourselves and each other by encouraging self-care and holding space for reflection. This past year has been unpredictable and emotionally activating, and there are moments when you need to intentionally take the time and opportunity to recharge. The Forum has provided flexibility to honor those moments, especially when you need them the most. I feel grateful to have been part of an organization that has prioritized self-care for ourselves and others. Just as we say we take a youth-centered approach to our work in the field, this past year reminded us that we also have to take a staff-centered approach within our organizations.
And obviously, this is a period of great transition for the Forum overall. As we begin the new year, we announced that Karen Pittman was ready to follow through on her long-stated desire to step out of day-to-day management of the Forum, to devote her incredible intellect and energy to refining and amplifying the big ideas that have fueled the youth development field and inspired and guided so many of us for decades. We can never thank Karen enough for the contributions she made to changing the odds for young people. We're fortunate that her contributions will continue in this new role and build on her legacy. Well, it's impossible to replace Karen. As chairperson of the board, I can say that we're excited about the Forum's future and look forward to naming a new CEO before long to join the strong team that Karen and Chris have nurtured. I want to thank Chris and the team who are leading us so ably through the transition. It's going to be an important year for the Forum, and I'm looking forward to sharing our progress and partnering with you to make it a great one.
We couldn't do any of this today or tomorrow without our national meeting sponsors. Great thanks to our friends at the Wallace Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and PwC. All right, with that, it feels like time to light the national meeting torch. Let's get these events underway.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ian Fegley, and I serve as one of the lead organizers of the Ready by 21 National Meeting. We're so happy to quote unquote see all of you here and hope you enjoy today and tomorrow. We've got a great lineup for you. 26 learning workshops, 3 keynote panel discussions, 2 meditation and mindfulness sessions, and 2 end-of-day reflections. I personally found the mindfulness with Nellie session that it just made my day. Such positive vibes and such a cool way to experience this event, starting out with some dancing. We have 3 exciting plenary discussions planned for today and tomorrow. Shortly, we'll take some time to reflect on the past year and look ahead to the potential before us. Presenters and panelists will help us consider the opportunity the current moment presents to reimagine and recreate in ways that leverage innovations and lessons learned to truly change the odds for young people. Tomorrow morning, we'll have our co-founder and senior fellow, Karen Pittman, presenting on equitable learning and development ecosystems that engage all learners and all adults in all settings. Karen will then be joined by representatives from 4 of the communities featured in the Wallace Foundation's recent Partnership for Social and Emotional Learning Initiative podcast series, featuring Dallas, Denver, Palm Beach County, and Tulsa. These district and out-of-school time leaders will share what they've learned about partnering across school and out-of-school time settings and how all adults can be engaged in supporting young people's social and emotional learning and development. We'll be closing tomorrow hearing from a few young leaders as they reflect on the unique styles and of leadership that they're developing and ways that adult allies can help them. We'll ground ourselves in research on adolescent brain development, engagement, equity, and belonging that shows why young leaders are positioned to lead societal change. We have a number of exciting learning workshops throughout today and tomorrow, with topics ranging from deconstructing the youth program quality intervention, COVID relief funding, creating an advocacy agenda, engaging young people in virtual settings, and the stability of out-of-school time systems. Of course, we wish we could all be together in person, but we hope this conference platform and experience are the next best thing. We have resource boosts, extensive chat features, including built-in teleconference tools, and a fun game with prizes to incentivize your engagement. The 3 people who explore the platform the most and attend the most sessions will receive prizes, from gift cards to the top prize being a free registration to next year's event. To see a quick overview of the platform, I invite you to visit the help desk in the lobby and click on how to navigate the Ready by 21 national meeting. It's now my absolute pleasure to turn it over to the fabulous Chanel Haraday.
Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to report as the operations and meetings manager that we have over 425 folks registered to join us today and tomorrow. And you guys are hailing from 36 states, including United Kingdom, our friends from over the pond. And you represent over 300 organizations, partners, and clients. So in the chat, we have an activity, and I'm hoping you guys can go to our interactive map, and you'll see a link to go to Poll Everywhere, which we will be using throughout our plenary sessions. So visit the link now, and we want you to tell us where you are joining us from today. So I'm going to give you a few moments to do that. And I see some folks popping up all across the country. Great, great, great. So as in previous years, we are really fortunate to have leaders joining us again from the national, state, and local levels, cutting across policy, practice, research, and collaborative partnerships. You guys represent school districts, out-of-school time intermediaries, youth serving organizations, foundations, city and county offices, state departments of education, faith-based organizations, United Ways, state after-school networks, and community colleges. That's pretty impressive. So we're going to do one more activity. As we get underway, we invite you to head back to Poll Everywhere, to the link again. And this time, I want you to give me a one-word hope for our time together over the next 2 days. So I'm gonna give you a moment to think of your message of hope, one word, as I hope not to mess up. And as our hope word cloud builds, the Forum for Youth Investment, oh, look at all that hope. I'm feeling hopeful. So while this word cloud builds, the Forum for Youth Investment hopes that you will make this conference engaging and as interactive as possible. So please don't hesitate to put your comments or questions in the chat. Feel free to tweet your thoughts at #RB21. And do take advantage of all the built-in moments for learning and reflection. And with that, I gladly hand over the virtual stage to my colleague and friend, Alondra.
While we won't be able to replicate all the parts of the traditional in-person national meetings that we've come to love, we thought it wouldn't be a Ready by 21 convening without lifting up the talents, voices, and stories of young people themselves. So let's not go any further without doing so. As my role as Senior Program Associate, I get to work with the Michigan Department of Ed and an incredible network of 21st CCLC and the Youth Development Resource Center in Detroit. I'm delighted to introduce Ife Martin, an 11th grade student who is a part of Inside Out. Inside Out is a literary arts program located in Detroit, Michigan. Their mission is to inspire students to think boldly, create bravely, and to share their mission with the wider world.
Hi, my name is Ife Martin. I will be performing a piece entitled Check-In. Hello, student. How are you feeling today? Happy face, sad face, neutral. Choose. My mouse hovers over each one. 14 months of stress and emotional turmoil boiled down to 3 knockoff emojis. I'm not sad, but I have my days and I'm not happy. My timeline and TV is filled with pain. I'm not numb. I'm just feeling everything at once. Colors clouding my vision. How can anyone see the world in black and white? I blindly click. Oh, I'm happy today. Now, student, is there anything you would like to tell us? You mean how I cried as I watched protesters face rubber bullets and tear gas? Or that my relatives are sick and I don't know how to feel, that I haven't been able to focus because the stress has been overwhelming, and that I've been in class every day, but I'm not sure I've learned a thing. I know you want to help me, but I've barely seen your face. I mean, you're worse than AI. Even Siri knows my name. Are you ready to handle these things I don't even understand? Or will I just be another problem to add to the pile? No, I've survived this long being strong on my own, so I type, I'm fine. Submit. Thank you, student. Have a nice day. Yeah. See you tomorrow.
Wow, thank you so much, Ife. That was incredibly powerful. And I know that all over the country and even across the world, as we saw from the map, folks are applauding for you and that striking performance just now. So everyone who's joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so thankful that you are here with us in this virtual space and so excited for everything that is to come over the next couple of days. I'm Mary Ellen Wiggins. I'm the forum's director for policy and research. And in my role, I have the good fortune to think about what does equity mean in the processes of how we generate and use evidence, and to also support some of our policy coordinating bodies, like our Children's Cabinet. And one of our best and longest standing partners in this work has been the Annie E. Casey Foundation. So right now, I'm really excited, totally delighted to get to introduce to you Lisa Hamilton, who is the president and CEO of the Casey Foundation. Lisa's taken on quite a few roles at Casey while she's been there. Before becoming president and CEO, she was previously the foundation's executive vice president and chief program officer, where she oversaw investments to promote community change, economic opportunity for families, and public system reform. She also guided efforts to strengthen the social sector and encourage the take-up of effective strategies through policy and data advocacy, leadership development, and research. We are so grateful to the Annie E. Casey Foundation and to Lisa Hamilton, of course. I invite you to enjoy these taped remarks. Thank you, Lisa.
There's no question that the past year has been extraordinary and extraordinarily difficult for our nation and our world. And while the pandemic has impacted people of all backgrounds and ages, it's been especially challenging for young people, particularly young people of color. They were more likely to work in industries that were hard hit by the pandemic, like retail, entertainment, and hospitality. They've had their educations disrupted when they couldn't access the internet or have computers to help them succeed in online learning. And they've also consistently reported the highest levels of anxiety among all Americans. As a result, the health and economic crises that we are navigating have eliminated a decade of progress in connecting young people to school and to work. Despite all of that, I remain hopeful about the road ahead, in large part because of what I see in young people themselves and among the leaders who are gathered for this meeting. We've seen the public, private, and nonprofit sector come together to help people meet their basic needs like food, housing, healthcare, and technology. We've seen innovations in online learning and training that have enabled young people to still take advantage of educational and job opportunities. We've seen advocates and communities use what they've learned during this time to call for permanent changes in our approach to child welfare and juvenile justice, to end placements in facilities and keep young people where we know they thrive best, in communities and in their families. And we've seen young people lead the way, demanding a more just and equitable future where no one lives in danger simply because of the color of their skin. I believe we need to seize this moment to regain and pave new ground. And that's why this meeting is so important. The people in this virtual room share a commitment to making sure young people have what they need to succeed. You recognize their incredible promise, and you refuse to let their circumstances dictate their potential. Thanks to the longstanding efforts of the Forum for Youth Investment and all of you, we know what young people need to get back on track and to be ready for adulthood. We know because of what science tells us about the adolescent brain, and because of what young people have told us themselves, that they need supportive families, mentors, and other caring adults in their lives. The chance to learn and grow into the people they want to be and to become leaders in their own right. And they also need opportunities to realize their goals and dreams and to rebound from mistakes if necessary. At the Annie E. Casey Foundation, we recently announced a commitment to increase our investments to support young people on that final stretch to adulthood, joining the Forum for Youth Investment and others who have long appreciated the importance of these years. Like you, we recognize that kids aren't done when they're 8 or 18, and that adolescence is a critical developmental window that shapes the trajectory of a young person's life. Young people still need the right developmental experiences and opportunities to come into their own, and we should do more to support them as they shape their path in life and to identify solutions so that they can overcome any obstacles that stand in their way. We're determined to see them all the way through their adolescence so that they can realize their true potential, and we want to work together with young people to help make that happen. They need that support now more than ever as we emerge from this time of crisis and start on the road to recovery. So how can we seize this moment? First, we can take the lessons of this year, all the innovation and creativity fueled by circumstance, and use that to inform how we go forward. We can leverage the opportunities emerging at the federal level to help young people rebound with an explicit focus on advancing racial equity. We have to make sure that older youth and young adults are not left out of recovery efforts. Organizations should take advantage of every new dollar available to help meet the current needs of young people and create an infrastructure for their future success. This should include developing programs and policies that reflect the cultures and values of a more diverse population of young people. Second, while we're making sure that children and youth have the educational and developmental opportunities they need, we also have to ensure that they have the basics. That includes food, housing, and healthcare, especially access to mental health care, which is too often overlooked or stigmatized. As young people have told us at Casey, they need a safe place to sleep every night before they can worry about a degree or a job. We can't lose sight of that, even as we help them reach for more. So we need to embed support for basic needs in all of our programming, no matter our focus. We have to work together to address the complex needs young people may have and make it easier for them to navigate all of the available resources and supports. Finally, while research and data remain essential in guiding our efforts, young people must be key in helping us develop our strategies and solutions. They know firsthand what they're dealing with and what they need, and combining their insights with what research and evidence tells us can be especially powerful. We need to be ready and willing to bring them to the table and listen. We want young people to succeed as individuals, and we know that their success is our nation's success. Ensuring that they can thrive will benefit our lives, strengthen our communities and country, and build a more equitable future.
Hello, I am Poonam Bora, and I am the Senior Research and Practice Specialist at the Forum's Weikat Center. In my role, I have the opportunity to work with the Readiness Projects team, where we are committed to reimagining the learning and development ecosystem for young people in and out of school. So I'm excited to introduce Linda Darling-Hammond, the President and CEO of the Learning Policy Institute. This has been a busy year for Linda. In addition to serving as President of the California State Board of Education and heading up the Biden administration's Transition Committee for the Department of Education, she managed to lead work with the design principles for schools and community settings. I was privileged to get to know her and the fabulous team at LPI through this work. We've asked Linda to share her thoughts on what we can all do to accelerate learning as we build forward together. Welcome, Linda, to the Ready by 21 national meeting.
I'm thrilled to be here with all of the wonderful staff and partners from the forum and so many other organizations that are committed to lifting up our young people in every imaginable way. What a wonderful opportunity to think together, to join hands together about how we can restart and reinvent learning opportunities for our youth. We have this moment in which we can really think about new designs for both schools and connections to the community and new ways of getting supports to our young people. After a year of struggling with distance learning and hybrid models, parents and teachers and policymakers from across the country are very concerned and talking a lot about, quote, learning loss and how to recover from the educational effects of the pandemic. And all of us, I think, legitimately resist the deficit orientation of that learning loss language, but the concerns are legitimate. As the crisis began, millions of children, particularly in low-income communities, lacked access to the computers and connectivity that would make remote learning possible, creating even greater equity gaps than already existed. And of course, as we all know, many communities of color have been especially hard hit by COVID-19, with high rates of infection and hospitalization, as well as greater rates of unemployment, housing and food insecurity. And these traumatic events, coupled with the ongoing instances of police shootings of unarmed civilians, particularly in the Black community, have led to a growing and ever more visible divide between the haves and the have-nots in this country, with many students encountering barriers to keeping up in school and others from disengaging from school altogether. So it's critically important that we address these concerns based not on outdated notions about remediation, but on what we know about how people learn effectively, what we know from the science of learning and development. And among the lessons are the following that really bind us together in schools and community organizations and families and communities as a whole to support young people with these ideas in mind. Among the lessons are the following: that positive relationships and attachments are the essential ingredient that catalyzes healthy development and learning and enables resilience from trauma. Children actively construct knowledge by connecting what they know to what they are learning within their cultural context. All of brain development is about connections between and among neurons, the neurons that fire together, wire together, as they say. But it's also true about ideas, that we learn by connecting what we already know, what we've already experienced, to the new ideas that we are learning. And those learning opportunities that happen in cultural contexts that are the root of the learning process. Learning is social, emotional, and academic. Children learn best when they feel safe, affirmed, deeply engaged within a supportive community of learners. Learning is enhanced by physical activity, joy, and opportunities for self-expression. Students' perceptions of their own ability influence learning. All children are motivated to learn the next set of skills for which they are ready. Few are motivated by labels that rank them against others or communicate stigma. These principles that are drawn from research about learning and from brain science mean that we have to reinvent our learning settings, both in schools and beyond, in ways that center relationships, unlike the factory model designs that we've inherited. We need to allow educators and youth developers to deeply understand what children know and have experienced so that they can build on it and draw connections to new learning and lead with social and emotional supports and skills, fully integrated with academic learning, and enable children to see their strength and what they do know, to feel competent and confident that they can learn. We also need to support educators and youth developers in recognizing the effects of trauma, accessing resources for children, supporting their attachment and healing, rather than unwittingly exacerbating the effects of trauma by using curriculum and rules that alienate, rather than reattaching students to school. As researchers at the Learning Policy Institute have noted in our volume on restarting and reinventing school, it's important not to return to normal, the old normal, but to create a new normal that is grounded in what we know from the science. What that new normal should look like is really important to envision. If we really want to support learning, the return both to school and to summer learning opportunities should not include the staple features of an outdated approach to learning that research has found actually undermines achievement. Those features include testing students to label and track them into high, average, and low groups that are segregated by perceived ability and often by race and class and language background as well. It means we should not be offering regimented drill and kill remedial instruction in these segregated groups, focused on filling gaps and basic skills in the artificial ways that are assessed on multiple choice tests, which then often causes them to be taught in equally artificial ways. Personalizing learning by putting students in front of programmed computers for machine-based instruction for long hours at a time, or piles of worksheets that offer the same decontextualized approach to learning. Punishing students who disengage or express frustration or despair by excluding them from the classroom or removing privileges like recess and library time. Placing the neediest students in remedial classes with the least trained and experienced teachers who are least likely to know how to create productive learning environments. Instead, a supportive return both to school in the fall and to learning opportunities in the summer will seek to ensure that students experience warm relationships and social emotional supports that are achieved by creating relationship-centered environments with built-in time for creating community, trust, and belonging among students and their families, engaging in outdoor play and exercise, expressive arts, and collaborative activities that support brain development and learning with community partners who are well positioned and very experienced in creating these kinds of settings that support children in their development. Encountering authentic, culturally responsive learning tasks and inquiry projects in both school and community settings that connect to their experiences, allow them to understand and positively impact their learning. Assess what students need both socially and emotionally, as well as academically. Address trauma with healing and support. Identify the next steps that students are ready to take in their learning, rather than labeling them. Inspire them by enabling them to take those next steps and see that they are gaining in their competence and in their confidence and in their engagement in learning. Accelerate learning through additional time and high quality tutoring rather than tracking. Intensive tutoring, which can occur in school and community organization settings, has been found to be highly effective, particularly when tutors are trained and the tutoring is regular. It both establishes strong relationships and it customizes teaching directly to student readiness and needs. This work should start right away, as I know all of you are planning for in this summer and the next school year. Summer school should not be a boot camp for students who are behind, but we need to find those rich opportunities for play and enrichment paired with academic content, offered through small classes and individualized instruction. The Cajon Valley School District in California has structured Camp Cajon for the summer in partnership with community-based organizations. Tulsa Public Schools will be partnering with organizations ranging from the YMCA to Tulsa's Bike Club, Global Gardens, Reading Partners, Debate League, and many more, creating highly engaging opportunities that mix recreation with learning. We can also motivate and educate students with opportunities like the Children's Defense Fund's Freedom Schools, modeled after the 1963 Mississippi Freedom Schools that developed leaders in the Black community. The CDF Freedom Schools now partner with community organizations, churches, and schools to provide literacy-rich after-school and summer programs for students in all kinds of communities. These programs are effective in promoting reading gains while they motivate and they inspire students as they read books that are culturally meaningful and discuss ideas aimed at social action and civic engagement for the betterment of their communities. The opportunity to contribute is highly motivating for students, particularly young adolescents. And indeed, recovery from trauma can be enabled by engaging in projects that allow students to grow and improve things, from school or community gardens and murals that feed and beautify, to a range of school, classroom, or community improvement projects that show students their strengths, produce a sense of agency and contribution as they advance growth and well-being for themselves and for others. As in-person school resumes, schools can help teachers understand students' needs with schools like the Rally Survey that the core districts have developed that provides regular opportunities about wellness and students' experiences. Community-based organizations can benefit from similar tools to take stock of where students are socially and emotionally, as well as academically. The more than $122 billion just allocated to K-12 schools in the American Rescue Plan, which allows for outreach and partnerships with community partners, provides states and districts with the opportunity to support all of these kinds of services and their coherent delivery through community schools models as well as a part of learning recovery. Community schools that use those partnerships with other organizations in the community to provide health care, mental health care, social service support, before and after school care, all of the elements of nutrition, support, engagement that children need to be, as whole people, raised up into a productive, caring community. To reattach students to school and accelerate learning throughout the coming year, the most effective places will provide well-designed collaborative learning opportunities, engaging students in all kinds of investigations, mathematical inquiries, culturally affirming expeditions inside and outside of school, and opportunities to reflect and express themselves in the arts and humanities. If we focus only on learning loss, we will walk down a familiar road, one paved with repetitive remediation, disengaged students, reluctant families who are disillusioned with impersonal, inauthentic learning. Beginning this summer and continuing into the next academic year, we should restructure schooling to build trust within supportive classrooms that do not ignore the trauma of the pandemic and that are connected to community partners to build capacity among trauma-informed adults and support providers who can make decisions based on all of these ways of thinking about the development of the brain and achievement in ways that understand that when we bring all the pieces together, we're not distracting ourselves from academic learning, but we are creating the pathway both to academic learning and to student well-being. If our students feel affirmed and attached, if they receive enriching experiences with targeted supports, they will learn in ways that far exceed the old normal and set the norm for a new age in education that builds on how children really learn rather than working against it. And to support this process, the Learning Policy Institute, with the Forum on Youth Investment and Turnaround for Children, have created design principles based on the science of learning and development for how to create positive developmental relationships, learning environments filled with safety and belonging, rich learning experiences that enable deep understanding, skills, habits, and mindsets for social, emotional, and cognitive development, and integrated support systems that help students get what they need when they need it. And you'll be learning more about that in the session that follows this one. I'll leave us with the words of John Dewey, who I think provides the guiding star for what motivates all of our work. And he put it this way: what the best and wisest parent wants for his or her child, that must the community want for all of its children. Any other ideal is narrow and unlovely. Acted upon, it destroys our democracy. Only by being true to the full growth of all the individuals who make it up can society by any chance be true to itself. And I want to thank all of you for the ways in which you really actualize the full growth of all of the individuals, all of the young people who make up our society. Thank you and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Linda, so much for joining us. And our panelists will join us here in just a minute, but thank you for taking the time. We hear all the things you've been up to this year. We know it's a full life and a full schedule, but I'm just so delighted that you've joined us this morning and have some time to stay with us in conversation to really get our reflection and conversation going as we head into these sessions later in the day today. And just one thing I'll say is our panelists come on screen to join us. I don't think many people know that you're actually somebody who knows Karen Pittman, has known Karen Pittman much longer than I have, because when your kids were little, you lived on the same block.
We did. We raised our kids together.
And I'm no doubt started having these conversations about like, what does learning look like in all of the different places and spaces in schools and in community, and your leadership with the National Commission of Social and Emotional Academic Development, in the Science of Learning Development Alliance, all of these things. It's just so great to have you as a thought partner in the work. We're going to be joined on screen now, I believe, by Brian Samuels with Chapin Hall, who's going to join us in the discussion. Also with Chekemma Fulmore-Townsend. And if you guys just want to come on screen, just go ahead and turn your cameras on and join us here. With Chekemma Fulmore-Townsend with the Philadelphia Youth Network, Meg Blinkiewicz with the Kalamazoo Youth Development Network, and Elizabeth Whitford with Schools Out Washington. And what we're hoping to do in this conversation is really just make it real, right? So I think what was so wonderful, Linda, about what you shared with us, and also your experience of just trying to respond and make things happen in California this year, as well as the country at large, is just, we're all figuring this out in a new way together. And what is it really taking right now to make a difference in the lives of our young people? Brian, I'm going to ask you to actually, as you think back to both what Linda said and also Lisa's opening, as somebody who has been thinking about the experiences of young people across all of the different places and spaces that they spend their time, just get us going in this conversation. What really sparked for you in these opening remarks to our day?
Yeah, so, while Lisa's comments were really kind of inspirational and motivating, it was really Linda's powerful ideas that really touched me. I was chief of staff at the Chicago Public Schools for about 3 years and thought that the principles that Linda just laid out were spot on, that schools really do need to recognize that social and emotional healing is a necessary part of learning. I was really struck by her concepts of engaging young people through that healing process, recognizing that trauma affects relationships and our ability to engage in healthy and productive relationships, and that this concept of fight and flight are both parts of relational development. And so really thinking about and engaging young people in really accelerating their own healing and recovery so that they can, in fact, engage in relationships that produced really positive results. And then I think ultimately the biggest push that I took from Linda's comments was that we ought not stop with just the evidence that we have today, right? That we need to innovate and drive young people towards positive results. And so we need to leverage what we know today, but taking only what we know today was probably going to be insufficient for making the changes that we really need to see in systems. And then the last point I would make is, folks always talk about systems change as really hard to achieve. But the pandemic demonstrated that when systems are motivated, they can change really fast. And so we ought to take that as an opportunity to point that out for systems and really encourage them to take the principles articulated by Linda and driving towards systems change at the same pace that they demonstrated that they could make change during the pandemic.
I love that.
Thank you. Linda, thoughts?
I was gonna say, I really love that, this redefines all deliberate speed, right?
Well, and that exactly, it's the conversation as we were, talking over the past week, Chekemma, Meg, Elizabeth, we were all talking about just how in our own organizations, we're learning about speedy deliberateness. Might be a way of saying it, that it is about trying to kind of respond in real time. I'm just like Meg, what Brian was saying about how we're just helping the adults that we're working with and young people kind of respond in these times. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in Kalamazoo?
Sure. So what really stuck out with Linda and Brian's comments were the narrative change. We're really trying to lean into celebrating what young people have learned about themselves, others, and the world around them. And adults as well. And we are taking CASTLE up on their 3 new SEL foundational skills of identity, belonging, and agency. We took the time with our SEL affinity group this year to define what those 3 concepts mean to us in a racialized context in Kalamazoo. And so we're all about supporting adults to create programs that have that sense of belonging. We had a teenager tell us the difference, or explain the difference between fit and belonging, because we say, oh, it's a good fit all the time, right? And this young person said, fit is when I show up like you think I should show up. Belonging is me showing up as my authentic self. And so narrative change, we try not to use the word fit anymore for adults or young people. We try to say belonging. And so for us, we're starting with that belonging and programs for adults and young people, understanding our racialized identity as adults and youth, and then building the agency. And for us, our agency definition is narrow in that we're trying to support adults and young people to dismantle oppressive systems. We've taken youth leadership and adult leadership and agency and say, okay, with our journey to critical youth development, what's the end game? And the end game for us in Kalamazoo is to dismantle oppressive systems, shoulder to shoulder, adults and young people. And so with the healing that has to go on, really appreciate Brian's comments. We are using the community resilience model, the CRIM model in Kalamazoo in the out of school time sector. And we view our role, I use the example of helping a young person pass 9th grade algebra. It's the #1 barrier in Kalamazoo to high school graduation, because you have to pass 9th grade algebra. And if you don't, you're what's called a 9+er forever. So we're not experts in math, but we can help a young person stay in their resiliency zone, their learning zone. And so if we can help young people develop those resiliency skills, that they're not bouncing out of that resiliency zone in algebra, we help them pass 9th grade algebra. And we're not math experts, right? So we're really, that's what we're leaning into, and the innovations that we're just beginning, but those are what resonated with Linda's comments and Brian's comments as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that kind of rapid response. Like, how are we learning very, very quick learning cycles to even figure out how we're doing business differently? Chekemma, I'm going to come to you in just a second, but I'm just curious, Linda or Brian, just the examples that you're seeing of where young people really are like in real time developing those agencies shoulder to shoulder with the adults that also work with them.
Well, I see it in a lot of the schools that have been organized around project-based learning and inquiry-based learning that is connected to the community, where the community is the source and the setting for the work. There's a group of students at Oakland High School who were, when the pandemic hit, they were studying how to make getting to school a safer thing, because they're located in a very, challenging neighborhood with all kinds of freeways and, barriers. They just continued when the pandemic hit, doing their collaborative inquiry, working with community-based organizations on the research and the strategies and solutions, and took it to the Oakland City Council at the end of the year, and actually got a bunch of changes made in the way in which their schools located in the community. They never got disengaged from school. They were completely, motivated by that sense of agency. Also then creates the resilience, the growth mindset that we were just talking about. And I love this notion of shifting from fit to belonging. Yeah. That is so powerful. I am going to write that down on my list. Carry it into all my meetings.
That's blowing up in the chat right now. Chekemma, I know this is resonating with you, just like both how young people are really leading the way in your work in Philadelphia, but then also if you could speak that a little bit, and also what you shared with us of just what it is what it's been to support young people during this year. I'm thinking back to Lisa's opening remarks too, just the basics in many cases.
There's so much that's resonating with me that I'm like beaming with energy and excitement. So it's nice to be amongst friends and family when we're talking about this work. I'm jotting down a couple of notes. So I think the first thing that resonated with me and was echoed by Linda's remarks, and even to some degree Meg's and Brian's, which is that like safety and security are prerequisites for success. And so we cannot grow when our basic needs are not met. And I think that looking at it from a lens of, as adults responsible for systemic change or programmatic change, whichever lever you're pulling, really keeping that as a focal aspect, and then challenging the system where it makes it difficult to show up and meet those basic needs. And that's something that we've been able to do in Philadelphia with supportive services. And one of the things that we know is difficult, at both triggering and re-traumatizing, is to constantly have to recount your stories and produce so much documentation to get something that is just basic for you to continue to move. And when early on during the pandemic, we were concerned about young people not being able to maintain their connections to programs because of the physical distances, the constraints of their home or community, and we wanted to do something about it. And we formed a partnership with one of our philanthropic partners called The Hive, who basically made a phone call and said, hey, do you think you could do emergency payments to young people directly? And I joked with Marita, I said, if I knew what that was like, I probably would have said no, because what I learned from this journey, it was that my heart and inspiration and mind was all in the right place. Let's make it easy. Let's create the data collection. Let's get young people money in the way that they tell us they need it. So let's do electronic payments and all these other things that sound great and cutting edge and innovative. And I learned that my organization was with me in mind and spirit, but maybe not in practice. And so we really struggled to grow. I underestimated how much taking that on would force us to grow, redefine urgency. I often say resistance is a stage in change. And what I learned about my organization during the pandemic is that you could resist a lot less. And so I'm not asking you to not resist. That's a natural reaction. Do that. But I need y'all to do that in 24 to 48 hours, because I don't have time to have you do that for a week on end or keep coming back to the resistance. We have to figure out how to make it work. And I'm proud of the efforts, right? We've disseminated $192,000 to young people in one-time payments to keep them connected to their program. And that was really important. But we also, at the same time, guidance was coming out about relief funds, and the rules were changing around nonprofit governance and finance related to these things. So I learned the limitations of my finance committee. I learned the limitations of my payroll processor. I learned the limitations of electronic systems like Cash App and PayPal, which seems super easy in your personal life because that's what it's designed for. Not so much easy for an organization who wants to just like drop $192,000 into an account. I did not do that. So please don't tell anybody that. All of my friends on this, we did not do that. We figured out ways to make it work. But it was a challenge, and it pushed us ultimately to support young people in the way that they needed. And if they didn't communicate to us what they needed, I don't think we would have been informed enough to make the process simple.
Yeah, just the story of kind of rapid response and rapid innovation. I want to get Elizabeth in here, and then we'll open it up a little bit more. But I think that's one of the things you talked about too. It's just how are we like iterating and learning very quickly? That was a learning year. It was definitely a learning year. How did that play out with Schools Out?
Yeah, I mean, everything I'm hearing is resonating so strongly, I think. So, we're a statewide organization, support expanded learning youth development programs around the state. And so many of these stories are what we were seeing happening in programs, and a lot of shift to direct support. And I think part of what you said so powerfully in our sector was just because our sector is so based in relationship at its best. It's based in relationship and connection. And what you saw was programs really shifting to be in much closer and quicker communication with young people and families about what was going on, what did they need, and then really quickly shifting. And I think to Chekemma's point, not simple, really, really hard to pull that off, but yet really these rapid improvement cycles, and then checking in, did that work? What do we need to do now? And the same thing happened within our own organization. So, I think it required us to be much closer and quicker conversation with folks on the ground, what was happening, what was needed, what did we need to shift, at the same time that we were in conversation pretty regularly with policymakers and state agencies trying to understand and inform those shifts. And as a result, we ended up restructuring our whole program delivery model and shifting, developing a lot more of our own content, creating our ability to be able to be a quicker and more responsive organization overall. So I think, for me, that feels like, again, it was rooted in relationship. There had to be some trust and relationship already established to be able to do that. But then a really much more intentional shift in asking, why are we doing this? What is the value it's adding? We were completely strapped on capacity all year. So we had to really just say, is this worth it? Or is this more valuable? And what is it that we're going to really focus our time on? So that kind of intentionality and responsiveness, I think I've seen it in the programs working directly with young folks, and then as in our organization as an intermediary as well. It's been a really powerful year of change.
I'm curious with that, and Elizabeth, you talked about this a little bit last week, and just opening it up for a broader conversation here with all of you. Just dive in, but I'm going to turn back over to Linda here for a second. One of the things we were hearing about was just the with the kind of rapid response and sort of the flexibility that often you have a little bit more in the nonprofit space to be able to respond. It is more flexible field to start with, but then you had education systems and partners that are kind of the major resources right now as funds are coming down into communities and having to set up plans and think at scale about how the responses are going to happen in the year to come. And just wondering, Linda, what you're seeing with this from the state level down to local, in California, other places, what you're seeing in terms of bringing that kind of flexible forward planning with community partners. Like how much we've heard about this kind of softening of the walls, but are they going to stay softened, or are they going to come back up, do you think, as we're heading into this year to come?
In California, we've just put billions of dollars in a proposed budget for before and after school programs, for school districts, for community schools, with the idea of softening the walls, as you put it, of making it possible to get kids what they need when they need it without all of the barriers and the silos and so on. I was really struck by Chekemma's discussion of how kids, have to go through this process every time they have to try to get services. And we need to be able to change our systems so that kids get what they need when they need it without all of the bureaucracy and the barriers that we all struggle with. So I think there's one set of things that we need to work on between and among the agencies that serve children at the local level, school districts and community organizations. But we have to carry that up to the county level, the state level, and the federal level. I think we have a federal administration that wants to make this work, wants to have a whole child perspective. We all know that the way our categorical program structures have evolved from the feds to the states to the locals is very dysfunctional. There's just so many different rules and regulations. We've talked a little bit about those that pertain to each and every funding stream and to each and every strategy. I think we need to be very proactive right now as a community in working with government officials to bring down the walls, to reduce the barriers, to explain what the problems are, and to get the work done to change that system so that it is integrated, so that we can give kids what they need when they need it, without all of that. And I think it's not the kind of thing, we're all in this work because our hearts resonate with the children and the families we work with. And it's not a lot of fun to like say, well, what are the regulations that need to change in order? But I think we should really put a little bit of our intellectual effort and collaborative effort into doing that at each of these levels. People are ready for it. Many states are thinking about how to have a children's cabinet. That's a conversation happening federally as well. What would allow us to really integrate all of the good intentions that come with all of that funding in a way that allows it to work for kids.
And you mentioned the Children's Cabinet, which you know that we support both the state and the local Children's Cabinet network here at the forum. But if you know of other states that don't have one that are starting to talk about it, please let us know, because we'd love to be helpful with the support there.
We will do that, yes.
Brian, I'm just curious on that one too, just as you're thinking across systems, what Linda's talking about there in terms of what's it going to take.
So I think one of the most striking things about what's happened in the last 12 months is really around this issue of race, racism, and self-interest, and the recognition, right, that racism is essentially driven by one's self-interest. It is in the interest of some to discriminate against others, right? And so what's really been powerful is to see, as the pandemic was really imposed on all of us, people redefining what their self-interest was, and that changing the way the systems are operating. And so I think there's an opportunity here to continue as we move into the new normal, to continue to ask the question, for whom's interest is this policy or practice, right? And push ourselves to understand it from the perspective of young people, and redesigning the system so that they see themselves in the systems, but most importantly, they see their self-interest addressed in the system, right? So we're not asking them to fit the system, Chekemma's point, but instead redesigning these systems that recognize what's in their best interest. And I think there's real power, and there are a ton of examples of how quickly these systems moved when it was in their self-interest to move. And I think that idea, holding on to the idea that we should be designing these systems around the self-interest of young people, that will ultimately allow us to leverage what we've experienced here and drive these systems towards better responses to young people.
I see the nodding head, so feel free to chime in there. I'm curious, Elizabeth, like what it takes, the really practicalities of what it takes to do that. You were sharing last week about even who gets to design, who gets to weigh in, who gets to be in the meeting, especially when things are moving this quickly. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit about your experience at kind of state and local level in Washington State, as folks have said, well, engage the community?
Yeah.
How do you do that on a rapid response time frame?
Sure. I mean, and in fact, I should say that I don't know that we've been directed to engage the community in some of these efforts, but for us, it's a core principle. I mean, the first thing I want to say, just in terms of like the shift in systems, one thing before I talk about that piece is that I think is hopeful is one of the things that was really freeing for us was funding became a lot more flexible. So funders, including state agencies who always say they can't do anything about these constraining policies, became more flexible and drove decision making down to those actually doing the work. And also we saw a big shift in funding in a more equitable way to Black, Indigenous, community of color-led organizations, and more. So in our state, we started to see that kind of shift. I'm hoping that stays, and that kind of philosophy, I think, which is about rooting decision making to those who actually know. So young folks, organizations working directly with young folks, making more of those decisions. I do worry a lot about the sense of urgency. So we had the opportunity, I mean, I think it's both the rapid cycles are exciting and powerful in systems. There is urgency, absolutely. And we've had the opportunity to be an intermediary grant maker on some of the stimulus funds that have come through. And it's always like, turn this $10 million, let's turn this $10 million around in a couple months. And, trying to do that in a way that is equitable, transparent, inclusive, and designed by those that were most seeking to impact or benefit from the funding, is really at tension with that kind of timeline. And so much in this pandemic, sitting at sort of tables with policymakers, you see just a small group of people, or mostly white, at the sort of like state legislator level, making decisions really quickly, and they actually don't have a lot of time. And it's dangerous, right? Because they're going to make decisions that aren't going to have the impact that they actually intend for them to do, because they're not rooted in the work. And so for us, when we got this opportunity, it's, I think, super imperfect, but we did at least build in, like, we had 1 week for stakeholder engagement, and we had like meeting upon meeting upon meeting, very intentionally invited folks from around the state to talk through and say, here's what we're thinking, what did we get right, what did we get wrong, and then did change our plan. We took it in, we readjusted what we were going to do with this funding and how we were going to deliver it, shared that back with the group, and paid people to participate and give us as partners and strategy partners for folks who were all across the state and BIPOC community leaders and organizations to help design it. So, I think, I'm not saying this is like the dream design, but at least, like, even when you have a very short amount of time, there's just sort of never an excuse. You have to build that in. But I just think it's really at tension and the kind of speed, like now with all this money coming in, with the American Rescue Plan, it's really exciting. It could be really powerful, but it could just fall out and reproduce the same inequitable systems that we have. And so, as those of us who may have some opportunity to influence that, really holding that, and even if it's really imperfect, how do we dive in to really try to shift those power dynamics so that we're making more equitable decisions as we move through.
Let's stay with that a little bit. Just what are folks seeing, Chekemma, as you talked about, is Brian's comment of like really centering young people in the work and this shifting the power dynamics. Just what are some things we've all talked about? Like, what are it's our lifelong work, but we have learned new things in this past year about how to do that. What would you share on that? And then I'm just, and Meg, Brian, Linda, I'm coming to you with the same question. Just what have you, in terms of really centering young people in the work, what are the things that we've learned in this past year about how to do this that we really want to carry forward?
I think it's important that we maintain urgency, but with intentionality, because if not, we're going to just recycle chaos and replicate inadequate strategies that we already know are not working. In order to center young people in the work, as adults, we have to be honest about our blind spots. And so we've spent a lot of time challenging assumptions, looking at process like language barriers, right? Especially if you're talking about policy can be extremely intimidating. And the reality is the impacts are on the ground with young people. And so asking questions in a way that allows you to gain, how does this really feel for them? Making space for their voice in the conversation, which might mean you have to not have the meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, because that's just not a good time for young people. It might mean that you have to get them there with food and other, benefits, and that you have to have relationship in order for them to authentically engage. So at PYN, we really focused on assessing where as adults we were perpetuating the problem, because there's just things about the world of work that force you to do that, right? You work from 9 to 5, or you did. I think the beauty is also technology has opened up a great window. And so if you can get the young people back on Zoom or Teams or text them, I have become more efficient at Instagram. It's not the easiest way to interpret all the responses. So I have a young person who is helping me navigate, does this heart emoji mean you agree with what I'm saying? Or does this mean that you like it, but you have other insights? And I think we just have to be open that their communication is going to show up differently. It doesn't make it less valid. It means you have to educate yourself. So I'm intentionally trying to learn more about what works in communicating with them, and then respond to what you know. Young people told us that 86% of them told us they needed an adult to help them fill out the application. Well, rather than keep moving forward with, here's the link, we built a call center so they could call an adult and get some help this year. We put in a program locator so that if you're in community and you have limitations, you can find things that are in your community to connect to. And so those are some of the practical changes that lead to longstanding results, but it takes a long time to educate and prepare prepare the adults to make room. It's not a young person problem from my perspective. It is actually a people we work with problem. And I remind people, we haven't been teenagers in a really long time. So we are not fluent in what it means to live through a pandemic. We are struggling with that, as adults. So we have to gain insight from young people as many ways that we can.
Other thoughts on that? And I'm seeing things starting to come in the chat as well. If you have questions or things that you would like to pose to the panelists, please feel free to do so. I actually see one here from Karen. I think it's on the theme.
I do see it, and I think it's a great question. And hi, Karen, wherever you are. So the question says, we'd love to hear you talk about how we use this disruption to help schools recognize the extent to which the youth who didn't log on or who were just struggling because they were involved with other systems, for example, child welfare, had already been disengaged, and what it will take in partnership with community organizations and public systems to not have them passed over. And I was just thinking about that, because one of the things that we have to use this moment for is to create relationship-centered organizations. And many community organizations are already relationship-centered, but many schools are not. The factory model high school was invented to not be relationship-centered. Kids come in, they see different, 7 or 8 different teachers in 45-minute periods. They don't have a home base. The teachers don't share kids. The kids don't have any one-on-one time with the teachers unless they've redesigned in a way that creates advisory systems where there is an adult and a family group that meets every day and can both be academically supportive and socially and emotionally supportive, unless they've created teams where teachers can work with the same kids, unless those teams are associated then also with, in a community school setting, the community partners who are also supporting the educational enterprise before and after school in a variety of ways. So I'm really hoping, this is an aspiration I have for our community schools investment in California, that those community schools not only create the relationships with the community-based organizations and services that kids need in ways that bring down the walls, that the silos have created, that make it possible to get to kids what they need when they need it, but also that those schools redesign themselves for relationships so that it is not easy for kids to disengage without having caring adults in multiple places structurally, designed to keep them attached and to take care of what their needs are. I know as a high school teacher, when I entered the profession, with 30 or 35 kids and 5 or 6 periods a day, you can care about your kids, but it is impossible to care effectively for 180 to 200 kids a day in a structure that is not designed to allow you to do that. So we've got to take this opportunity to build structures and designs that really keep kids supported and attached and allow adults to do the relationship-centered work that they want to do.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and appreciate the structural redesign sort of across the community, that you've got those places, as you said, that sort of start with relationships already. What's it like to bring those more into conversation? Folks who signed on to the conference this morning were welcomed by Gigi Antoni at Wallace Foundation that was talking about the Partnerships for Social Emotional Learning Initiative and what it's been like for sort of, and we're going to hear from them tomorrow, many of them in Karen's session, of what it's like as a school system and in some ways a more asymmetrical set of providers, a provider network, and working with intermediaries, whether it's community schools, which has like the brokering connection, or as you said, those other community partners, what it's like to come into conversation together and say, if each and every experience needs to look like this, if it starts with relationships, if this is how we know how learning happens, then how do we reimagine the entire learning and development ecosystem? What does that look like? And I think that what's been so interesting in this past year is we kind of had to, it was more conceptual and then it got really pretty real with families as a key part of that as well, and really seeing them in different ways as places of where learning is happening. So how to take that, how to take this giant, in some ways horrific, but aha moment that we've had this past year and take it forward into structural redesign questions that really are about building back better, building forward together, building back differently. Really, how do we do that? Concretely, I'm just curious, like, what are the things, if you think about the next couple of months, folks are thinking over the course of the summer about what the next school year looks like. What are the conversations that you all are in where you think people are going to get that practical and in some ways tactical about building back? Where are you seeing the opportunity now?
So I would just quickly make the point that it's often the case, particularly in school systems, where they've got struggling students. The goal is to isolate those students and to narrow the amount of information that's flowing towards them in the hopes that they can effectively teach the lessons that allow them to improve test scores. In a lot of ways, what this pandemic reminds us is that people learn through relationships. And so it's about widening the audience of people that are helping a young person learn as opposed to narrowing it. And so I think using the summer to re-engage young people and not wait until day one of the school year to start to do that engagement, and to bring more people of the community into schools to help people see how you learn through and benefit from the support that comes from relationships. Because the easy thing would be to say is to take Linda's point and say that, boy, there's this learning gap, and the way we solve that learning gap is to narrow the attention of students and focus them exclusively on content. And the pandemic certainly validates for us that that's an unlikely winnable strategy. And so bringing more people into the community, bringing more support to young people, and engaging them in a different way, I think is absolutely critical to making up any difference that might have emerged during the pandemic.
You know, I also think that closing the gaps, what I'm encouraged by here locally in Philadelphia is the intentional efforts to close the gap between youth serving systems. We have a deputy mayor, her name is Cynthia Figueroa, and she's been really marshaling school districts, juvenile justice, child welfare together to say, what is it going to take to play it safe Philly, right? Which is what we are calling our summer of engagement. But what it has done is not have summer jobs be separate from summer school, be separate from enrichment activities. And it said to the world, like, we're trying to effectively engage 35,000 young people together as a system. What's the part that you play and what are you contributing? And we have a diverse set of community actors engaged in leveraging our individual expertise towards this common goal. And that has been really encouraging. I will say, though, the challenge aspect of that is matching the strategy to the available resources. And that is a real challenge in navigating or bending the regulations enough to allow for the innovations. I always like to know the rules, not because I want to break them. I just want to bend them. I want to see how far they can stretch in order to achieve those goals. And so that's been a challenge aspect of this work. But despite those challenges, we're trying to be intentional about leveraging community assets, working with non-traditional partners. And I think the other challenge is what we're learning is that capacity is stretched thin in our nonprofit space, at least locally here. And so we have to invest differently or additionally. Like, we don't want to take money away or move money that people need, but we need to really focus on the learning for those youth development professionals and organizations that are supporting, because this is taking them out. And so at the end of the day, we want them restored and vibrant in order to be active participants, and they are with us, but they are going to need more support in order to do that, and enhanced training and capacity and flexibility. And that's something that we've been advocating for as an intermediary.
I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time together here. I'm just curious, we did have one of the questions in chat, maybe Meg this is one that you might want to take for us as folks have been looking at this year, because as the work that you're doing close to the ground with not just young people and your frontline workers, but also with families. What are some of the things that is just one thing that that you would say that you've learned in this past year in this work that you want to carry forward?
We've really tried to use SEL as a bridge builder and have that be a common language that we build with families, and recognizing the expertise, all the different areas that families have expertise in, and what creating a sense of belonging for them in the out of school time. Again, not the fit, but the actual belonging of families in the out of school time. And so that's something that we've started this year and will continue very much this summer. The teens in Kalamazoo, their theme is taking back my summer. And so it's everyone taking back their summer, taking back my community, right? Not just young people, their families as well. So for us, it's continuing to listen. We've been doing a lot of listening to families over the last year, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
And we've been hearing across the board the need for this to be the summer of innovation, of connection, recognizing the connections that have already been there through this past year, and just how to keep them going and build on them in the year to come. So how do we really do that together? I would love to thank all of you for joining, Linda, Brian, Chekemma, Meg, Elizabeth, just getting us going today in this conversation. This is really setting us up for what the next 2 days are. And the number one word I think I saw pop off of that wordle at the top of the day was inspiration, and that what people were hoping for was inspiration. It has been a hard year. We are still in it, but we are in it together. And I do, just to each of you, express all of our thanks for helping us get grounded in what our work is here, even for these next 2 days, and how that helps us with the work that we're doing in all of our communities and states and across the country. Thank you again. I'm going to turn over now to my colleague, Kim Robson, who leads the team at the Forum's Weikert Center, because as we know, this is all about how learning happens. And one of the ways that learning happens is you need to take time to reflect. And so we're going to make a little meaning now and reflect on what this opening session has meant to each of us. Kim, thank you.
Hi there. Well, thank you so much to the panel. This was an incredible start to the conference. Certainly inspiring and very thought-provoking. And I know there's been lots of comments already in the chat and on Twitter. Check out the hashtag RB21 on Twitter. But we also want to just take a moment and have an opportunity for reflection together before we go on to the rest of the conference today. One of the things that I love about youth development work is that it's really about human development, and the things that are good for young people also are good for us as adults. And so having a moment to reflect and really to just take a minute and think about what we've heard and what we've learned and how we're going to carry that with us is an important part of how we engage in learning that we don't always take the time to do. And so in the chat, you'll see a PDF of a note catcher to help us collect some thoughts about our reflections right now. It's up on the screen. We're going to just take a moment and feel free to fill out the PDF. It's fillable, so you can write in it, or you can continue to put these things in the chat or on Twitter if you have been busy tweeting this morning. I've enjoyed following along on Twitter. And we're just going to note 3 aha moments that we had this morning, 2 connections that we made in our work, and 1 question that you'll be taking with you into the sessions this afternoon. And so this is just a way to give us a tool and a framework to help us to reflect a little bit. And I'd invite you to join us. So we're going to take about 2 minutes to have that opportunity for reflection, and then we'll share out a little bit in the chat before we wrap up today. You can go ahead and wrap up your reflections if you were recording them in your notebook and the note catcher that we shared or any other place. I see there's a comment in the chat. I invite others to drop in a comment, whether that's your one question that you're carrying with you or an aha that you had throughout the course of this session today. I see a note about the point about belonging rather than fitting in. I think that's something that resonated with many people. Certainly something that I will be continuing to think about. How does that shift from a framing of fitting in to belonging really change some pretty fundamental things about how we organize our work? More comments and reflections coming into the chat about that aha moment about fit versus belonging, about using SEL as a bridge builder with families and with students. So I would just invite you to continue to sort of think about these reflections. There's also a chat space in the virtual conference platform, and so you can also move those conversations there. There's lots of places and ways to connect. And I think that my colleague Ian is going to come back and give us a little bit of wrapping up and some announcements as we close out this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So at this point, we have a break until 1:30. We will have 2 rounds of 9 learning workshops each. So please explore the agenda tab and make a decision as to which session that you want to go to. We're going to have these be as discussion focused as possible. So definitely come into those sessions ready to connect with your peers and talk about your insights. The mindfulness session, if you missed it this morning, it is now posted to the platform and the recording. I highly encourage you to check that out either this afternoon or tomorrow. It was an amazing experience. We're going to cap today off with a reflection session, continuing on this frame of really, letting you think about the lessons that you're learning and the aha moments that you're experiencing. And that'll feature the absolutely marvelous and amazing Monica Marie Jones. So all these sessions that I'm mentioning, you can access within the conference platform, either across the ribbon, there's a tab called Plenaries and Workshops, or there's a door in the middle of the lobby space called Plenaries and Workshops. So please go there and make a decision as to which workshops you want to go to sometime in the next hour. And please stay active in the chat and the booths. Wanted to give a quick update at the 1/3 of the way point in the gamification and in our game that we have. The current leader is Joe Cruz. Coming in second is Patricia Sasson, and in third, Ariel Nieves. We have a lighthearted staff competition, and currently Danielle Varner is in the lead. So she is in fourth. So please keep exploring the platform. Please keep engaging with the booths and engaging in chat. And thank you very much for being here. See you at 1:30.